Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our bottle animated website series. Previously, in part 1, we built the foundation and created the first section of our website. Now, in this video, we'll continue where we left off and work towards completing the full website. So, let's head back to our HTML file and start creating the next page of our design. Throughout this video, you will learn how to use GSAP to create scrolling-based animations, how to add GSAP ScrollTrigger, and how to use the browser inspect window to its full power. First, let's create a div with the class name nextPage. Inside it, we'll create another div with the class name top. Now inside this top div, let's add an h1 tag. Inside the h1 tag, we'll create two span tags. The first span will have an ID of text1 and inside it we'll write the word our. The second span will have an ID of text2 and inside it we'll write the word heritage. After that, we'll create another div with the ID text content. Inside this div, we'll add a p tag and inside it we'll write some lorem text. After that, let's create a div with the ID nText. Inside it, we'll add an h3 tag and write the word discover. Then, we'll paste the same arrow logo that we previously used. Next, still inside the nextPage div, let's create another div with the class name bottom. Inside this bottom div, we'll create three separate divs with the IDs left, mid, and right. Next, inside the left div, create an image tag, and for its src attribute, add the img1.jpg file. Then, inside the mid div, create an image tag with the ID first image, and for its src attribute, add the img4.jpg file location. After that, create another image tag with the ID second image, and for its src attribute, add the img2.jpg file. Finally, inside the right div, create an image tag, and for its src attribute, add the img3.jpg file. And that's all the HTML code we need for the first page. Now, let's move to our CSS file to style the next page section properly. After that, we'll go to GSAP to create our scroll-based animation. This is our website, and you'll notice that nothing seems to have changed. But wait a minute, I'll show you where our next page div is currently located. First, scroll up to your CSS file and locate the styles for the page 1 div. From there, simply add next page as well, so that all the styles of the page 1 div also apply to the next page div. This way, both pages will share the same styling and maintain a consistent look throughout the website. Then let's go ahead and add some additional styles for the next page div. Set its position to absolute, apply a padding of 1 rem 5 rem, and set top to 0 and left to 0. This will make sure the next page is properly positioned and aligned at the very top left corner of our layout. Now open the browser, and you will see that our next page is positioned at the top left corner of the website. Since it takes up the full width and full height, it completely covers the entire page. But you might notice some navigation text is overlapping with each other. Let's fix that. Simply add z-index2 to the next page div, and this will stack the page on top of all other elements. Now open the browser, and you will see that the overflow problem has been solved. Next, open the inspect window and find the div with the class name nextPage. Select it, then go to the CSS panel, and here add display, none. You will notice the next page disappears, and beneath it, our page 1 div is now visible, the one we previously created. After that, let's update some styles of the next page div. Set the top value to 50% and the left value to 50%. Then, add a transform translate -50%, -50%. This will perfectly center the next page div both vertically and horizontally on the screen. Now let's add some style to the h1 tag that we placed inside the top div. We'll set its position to relative. The reason we are doing this is because later, when we add animations with GSAP, we'll need this relative positioning to control the movement and placement of the text more precisely. Next, let's move on to the span tags inside the h1. Here we'll first set the font family to Quicksand, which gives our heading a clean, modern, and professional look. Then, we'll adjust the font size to 5 rem, making the text bold and eye-catching. Finally, we'll set the font weight to 300, which balances the heading, keeping it slightly lighter and more elegant instead of being too heavy. Now let's move on and style the top div inside our next page div. First, we'll set its width to 100% so it stretches across the full page. Then we'll give it a height of 15%, so it only takes a small portion at the top of the page. Next, we'll make this div a flex container by adding display flex. To control the spacing, we'll set justify content to space between so that the elements inside spread out to opposite ends, and we'll use align item center to perfectly align them vertically in the middle. Finally, we'll add a small padding of 0 top and bottom, and 0.5 rem on the sides to give a little breathing space without affecting the layout too much. Open the browser, you'll notice that our heading texts are placed side by side just as expected. However, they still don't look properly styled. Next, let's style the div with the ID text content. We'll set its position to relative so that later we can easily place and animate elements inside it. Then, we'll give it a width of 40%, which means this text section will only take up a portion of the page and leave enough space for our images and other elements to breathe. After that, let's style the text with the ID text1 and give it a color of #C0AFA9. This will give the word a soft and elegant look. Similarly, let's style the text with the ID text2 and set its color to #032C95. This will make the word heritage stand out with a bold and deep blue tone, creating a nice contrast between the two words. Next, let's add styles to the div with the ID end text. Set its display to flex so that the text and arrow logo can sit side by side. Then, set align items to center to align them vertically in the middle. Add a gap of 0.5 rem to create some spacing between the text and the arrow icon. Finally, give it a width of 100% so it stretches across the container. After that, let's style the H3 tag inside the div with the ID end text. First, apply the quicksand font family to match the overall design. Then, set the font size to 2 rem so it stands out. Next, add a font weight of 500 to make the text slightly bold. Finally, set the letter spacing to 5 pixels to give it more breathing space and a stylish look. Next, let's add style to the icon inside the div with the ID end text. Simply set its font size to 1.5 rem, so it stays balanced with the H3 text beside it. Now let's move on to styling the div with the class name bottom. Here, we'll set the width to 100% and the height to 85%, so this section takes up the remaining space beneath the top part of the page. Next, we'll apply display flex. Using Flexbox makes it easy to place the 3 inner divs, left, mid, and right, in a row, right next to each other. Finally, we'll add a gap of 1 rem. This gives a little breathing room between each column, so the images don't stick together and the layout feels clean and balanced. Next, let's style the divs with the ID left and right. We'll give each of them a width of 45% and a height of 100%, so they take up almost half of the available space on each side of the layout. Then, we'll add a border radius of 20 pixels. This rounds off the corners of these sections and makes the overall design look softer and more polished instead of having sharp, boxy edges. Now, if you open the browser, you'll notice that visually nothing seems to have changed yet. This is happening because all the images are currently overflowing from their containers. Don't worry, we'll fix them one by one. Let's start by styling the div with the ID mid. We'll give it a width of 25% and a height of 100% so it fits neatly between the left and right sections. Next, we'll set its display to flex and apply flex direction column. This will stack the images vertically inside this section. Finally, we'll add a gap of 1 rem to create equal spacing between the stacked images, making the layout look cleaner and more organized. After that, let's move on and style all the image tags inside the divs with ID left and right. We'll set their position to relative, so later on we can apply animations or extra styling without issues. Next, we'll set the width to 100% and the height to 100%, so the images perfectly fill their containers. Finally, we'll apply ObjectFit, cover. This makes sure the images maintain their proportions while covering the entire space of the container, giving a clean and professional look without any stretching. Next, let's add one more style to the divs with ID left and right. We'll set overflow to hidden. This will make sure that if any part of the images goes outside the container, it won't be visible. This small adjustment is very important because it keeps the layout clean and ensures that our images stay perfectly inside their rounded borders without spilling out. After that, let's style the images with ID first image and ID second image. We'll set their position to relative, width to 100%, and height to 40%. Then add a border radius of 20 pixels to keep the edges smooth and rounded. Finally, apply Object Fit Cover so the images scale properly inside the container, and set Overflow hidden to make sure no extra parts of the image go outside the borders. Open the browser, and you will see the middle images are now properly styled. But if you notice carefully, the bottom image looks a bit small. We want to make it taller so it looks balanced with the layout. To fix this, let's add an extra style only for the second image. Set its height to 60% instead of 40%. Open the browser and you will see that our page is now perfectly styled. All the images are placed properly, and the text is styled just the way we wanted. It's really starting to look like an amazing website. Now that everything is done in our HTML and CSS, let's move on to the JavaScript section. Here, we will create our GSAP ScrollTrigger animation to bring this page to life with smooth scrolling effects. Now let's move to our JavaScript section where we'll start creating the scroll animation. First, we create a new variable called TL2 and assign it a GSAP timeline. While creating this timeline, we also pass in an object with ScrollTrigger settings. Inside the ScrollTrigger, we set the trigger to our page 1 section. Then we define the start point as 20% and the end point as 150% 20%. For now, we also keep the marker set to true so we can see exactly where our animation starts and ends while testing. Finally, we add scrub with a value of 1, so the animation smoothly follows our scroll movement. Open the browser and you'll see that our start and end markers are visible on the website. But right now we don't really have enough space to scroll through the animation. To fix this issue, we need to pin the section while the animation runs. So inside our ScrollTrigger object, we add pin set to true. This makes the page 1 section stay fixed in place during the animation, giving us enough scrolling space to see the entire effect properly. Now let's open the browser and bring up the inspect window. From there, select the next page div. In the CSS panel, look for the line where we added transform, translate, -50%, -50%. If we select the second -50% value then press the keyboard's up arrow key, you'll notice the next page div smoothly moving downward toward the bottom section of the page. This quick adjustment helps us visually test how the page will shift. We will use this same concept to create our scrolling animation. Once we find the right position for the next page div using the inspect window, we simply copy that updated value and then move back to our CSS file to update the transform style permanently. This way, the position adjustment is saved in our code and will stay consistent every time we load the page. Open the browser and you will notice that our next page is now hidden exactly the way we want. This sets the perfect base for us to begin adding our scroll-based animation using GSAP. After that, we move back to our JavaScript file and write TL2.2. Inside it, we select the next page div, then create an object. Within this object, we set the transform property to translate -50%, -50%. This way, as we scroll, the next page div will smoothly transition from its hidden position into its proper place on the screen. Now let's open the browser and scroll the page. As we scroll down, we can clearly see the next page div sliding up smoothly into view, moving from the bottom to the top. This creates a really nice scroll-based reveal effect and makes the transition between our first page and the next one feel fluid and dynamic. Next we want to focus on animating the heading and the subtext that sits beside it. Let's begin with the heading text first. We'll animate it so that when the user scrolls, the heading smoothly transitions into view, creating a dynamic and engaging entrance effect that instantly draws attention to the top section of our next page. So first, let's move back to the CSS file. You'll notice we have already added the position relative style to our heading earlier, which will help us control its movement. Now, open the Inspect window in the browser and select the h1 tag that is inside the div with the class name top. In the CSS panel, set its left value to 30%. Then, using the keyboard up and down arrow keys, adjust the value until the heading is positioned exactly where we want it. After that, add a top value of 25% so that the heading text is placed nicely, ready for us to animate it later with GSAP. After that, let's take the left and top values that we just tested inside the browser inspector and paste them into the h1 style inside our CSS file. Once we've added them, we should comment those lines out. The reason is that we don't want them applied permanently through CSS. Instead, we'll be creating a GSAP from function later to animate the heading text from those starting positions back to its original place. This way, the animation looks smooth and controlled rather than being statically positioned by CSS. Now let's go back to our JavaScript file. Inside our timeline, we will add a dot from function. Here we will target the h1 tag inside the top div. Then we will pass an object. First, we will add a small delay of 0.3 seconds. After that we will paste the left and top values that we calculated earlier from our CSS file. Next, let's change the CSS style to JavaScript. After that, we want this heading animation to move along with our scrolling page animation. To make this happen, we will add a label inside the GSAP timeline. Let's write a label called A inside both the functions. By doing this, both animations will run together in perfect sync as we scroll through the page. Next, we will work on the right side text. First, we will position it just beneath the heading so that it looks aligned with the overall layout. After that, we will add smooth scroll-based animations to all the images, so the entire section feels more dynamic and interactive as you scroll through the page. After that, let's move back to the CSS file and scroll down a little bit until we find the styles for the left and right divs. Here, we'll comment out the overflow line. Just beneath this section, you'll see the styles for the first and second images. Comment out their width and height properties, and instead, set the width to 10 rem and the height to 10 rem. Also, comment out the height style that we previously added for the second image. Now, open the browser and you'll notice that both the first image and second image are styled exactly the way we wanted. Next, scroll down a little bit and you'll find the image styles inside the left and right divs. From here, comment out the width and height lines, and then add new values with width set to 10 rem and height set to 10 rem. Once that's done, open the browser, and you'll see that all the images are now styled properly. With this, we're ready to move on to the next step. After that, let's style the image inside the div with the ID right. First, set its top value to 10%. Then, open the Inspect window and select this image. In the CSS panel, start by adding a top value of 10%, then use the keyboard up arrow key to adjust its position until it looks correct. After that, add a left value of 20%, and again, fine-tune it using the keyboard arrows to place it properly. Once you're happy with the position, copy this style and paste it into the CSS file. Then, open the Inspect window again and select the image inside the div with the ID left. In the CSS panel, set its top value to 5%, and use the keyboard up and down arrows to adjust it until the image is placed correctly. After that, add a rotate value of -22 degrees and a border radius of 10 pixels to give it a nice tilted and rounded effect. Once you're satisfied with the positioning, copy these styles and paste them into your CSS file. This way, the adjustments will be saved permanently, and you won't lose them when refreshing the browser. Open the browser and you'll notice that both of our images are now positioned properly. The next step is to move these two images further down so that they sit nicely in the middle section of our page layout, giving the design a more balanced and visually appealing look. Next, let's move back to the CSS file. Scroll up a little until you find the styles for first image and second image. Inside their style block, add top 50%. This will shift both images downward, placing them closer to the middle section of the page for a cleaner and more balanced design. Open the browser and you might notice that the middle images still have too much border rounding, which doesn't look quite right. To fix this, go back to the CSS file, locate the styles for the middle images, and comment out the existing border radius line. After that, add a new border radius with a value of 10 pixel. This will keep the corners slightly rounded but much cleaner and better aligned with the overall layout. Lastly, we want to adjust the left text so it sits neatly beneath the heading. To do this, open the CSS file and scroll up a little until you find the styles for the div with the ID text content. Inside that style block, add top 120% and left -25%. This will push the text downward and slightly to the left, placing it right under the heading in a balanced way. Now, go back to the CSS file, then comment out both of these lines because we don't want them to take effect directly from CSS. Next, open your JavaScript file and create a new .from method. Inside it, select the hash text content element. Then, write an object, and inside that object, add delay 0.3 second. After that, paste the styles we previously calculated from the CSS, top 120% and left -25%. Lastly, don't forget to add the label A at the end of the .from method. This will ensure that the text content animation plays in perfect sync with the heading and other animations we already grouped under the same label. Open the browser and start scrolling the website. You'll see that both the heading and the left side text smoothly move back into their original positions as the scroll progresses, creating a seamless and engaging effect. After that, let's move on to styling all the images using GSAP. Go to your JavaScript file and create a .from method. Inside it, select the image inside the div with ID left. Then, create an object and inside it write delay 0.3 second. Now, paste the active width and height styles that we previously set in the CSS file. Once you've done that, go back to your CSS file, copy the last 3 lines of styles we added for that image, and paste them inside this GSAP object. After pasting, make sure to comment out all these styles in the CSS file and uncomment the previous styles. This way, the image styles will now be fully controlled by GSAP, letting them animate smoothly as part of our scroll-triggered transitions. Next, update all those copied CSS styles into proper JavaScript object values inside the .from method. Lastly, add the label A. Then create another .from method and this time select the image inside the right div. Inside the object, set the properties just like we did before. Add delay 0.3, then paste all the previous image style that we added earlier. Next, let's move back to the CSS file. You will find the style block for the right image. Comment out that entire section so it doesn't apply directly from CSS. After that, adjust the values by setting the top to 15% and adding left 25% to position it correctly. Lastly, when we bring these styles into our GSAP animation, make sure to add the label A so this animation runs in sync with all the other animations we've already created. Open the browser and start scrolling the page. You will notice that both the left and right side images smoothly expand as you scroll down, and then gradually return to their original positions. This effect gives the layout a dynamic feel, as if the images are breathing into place with the scroll, making the entire section look more interactive and engaging. Now let's move back into the CSS file. If you scroll up, you'll find the styles for first image and second image, and these are the ones we'll work with now. Go to the JavaScript file and create a .from method. Inside it, select both the second image and first image together. Then create an object and add delay 0.3. After that, switch back to the CSS file. Copy the last 2 lines of styles we added for these images and paste them into the JavaScript object. Now again go back to the CSS file, copy the width and height values, then comment them out. Also, comment out those last 2 lines you just copied, and finally, uncomment the original width and height values we had earlier. Now paste these values. Once this is done, convert all of these styles into proper JavaScript object properties inside the .from method. And to make sure everything runs in perfect sync with the other animations, don't forget to add label A at the end of the object. Lastly, we need to clean up one more style from the CSS file that we no longer need. This way, our image height will now be fully controlled through GSAP animation, keeping everything consistent and smooth. Open the browser and scroll through the page. You'll notice that all the images and text are now styled properly, and the scroll animations are working exactly as we planned. But if you look closely, the border radius effect is not being applied to the images. This is happening because we commented out the border radius line in our CSS, and we haven't yet added it back into the GSAP animation object. Now, let's go back to the CSS file and locate the styles for the first image and second image. Inside those style blocks, simply comment out the border radius line. Open the browser and you'll notice that the middle two images now have rounded corners applied correctly. But the left and right images are still missing this effect, because earlier we commented out the overflow hidden property from their CSS. To fix this, we'll add the rounded corner effect using GSAP instead. Go back to the JavaScript file and create .set method. Inside it select the left and right div. Then create an object and inside it write overflow hidden. This way, both divs will clip their child images, and the rounded corner effect will be visible during the animation. Open the browser and scroll the page. You might notice that the overflow hidden property is still not applied to the left and right images. This happens because the overflow style is being added at the end of the animation timeline. To fix this, we'll add one more style. Simply write tl.to. Then inside it add this equation that I am writing. Open the browser and scroll the page. You will now see that the scrolling animation works smoothly, and the image overflow issue is completely resolved. All images stay within their containers, and the rounded corners are displayed correctly throughout the animation. Now that we have completed the design and animation for the next page section, let's move back to the HTML file and create a new div with the class name page2. This will be the container for the second page. After that, let's move to the CSS file and add page2 alongside the page1 style. This way, page2 will inherit the same basic styling as page1, ensuring consistency across our website's pages before we start adding unique styles and animations for page2. Next, let's remove the markers, true line from our GSAP ScrollTrigger. This will clean up the visual markers on the page so that when we preview the website, the scroll animations run smoothly without any debug indicators showing up. But now, before creating the page2 div, let's clean up our CSS file by removing all the commented lines. These lines were useful during development and debugging, but now they are no longer needed, so cleaning them up will make our CSS file organized and easier to read. Now, if you open the browser, you will see that our next page is properly styled and positioned. Next, we will start adding elements to our second page. Now, first let's move to our HTML file. Inside it, create an h2 tag and write Saratoga Social inside it. Below that, create a div with the class name sliderbox. Inside this div, create another div with the class name slider. Inside the slider div, create a div with the class name imgbox. Inside imgbox, add an image tag. After adding this image tag once, copy and paste it 9 more times using Alt plus Shift plus down arrow so that you have a total of 10 image tags stacked inside the imgbox. This will complete the structure for our slider section on page 2. Next, let's add the src attribute to all these image tags. I'll share the GitHub link in the description of this video where you can download all the images for this slider. Here you can see I've added all the image links to the src attributes in the image tags. After that, let's create a div with the class name text. Inside this div, create an h3 tag and inside it write any heading text you want, or you can copy what I write. Then create 2 paragraph tags, each containing a couple of lines of text as I show you. Finally, create an h4 tag and inside it write subscribe. This will complete the content structure for our second page. That's all the HTML code we need for this page. Now let's move to the CSS file to style this page and make it look perfect. First, let's style the page2 div. We set its height to 150 viewport height so the page becomes larger than the normal screen size and allows us to create scrolling effects. Then we add display flex with flex direction column so that all the child elements are arranged vertically one after another. Next, we center everything in the page by using justify content center and align item center, so the content stays in the middle of the page. Lastly, we set overflow hidden so that if any content goes outside the boundaries of the page, it will be clipped and no unwanted scroll bars will appear. This way, the layout stays clean and ready for animations and transitions. Next, let's add style to the imgbox div inside the slider div. Set its width to 25 rem and height to 25 rem so the image container has a fixed square shape. After that, set overflow hidden so that if the image inside this box is larger than its boundaries, the extra part will be clipped and not shown, keeping the layout neat. Then, let's style the image tag inside the imgbox div. Set its width to 100% and height to 100% so it fills the entire container. After that, set object fit to cover so the image maintains its aspect ratio while covering the whole space, cropping any excess parts if necessary, for a clean and balanced look. Next, let's style the slider div inside the page 2 div. Set its display to flex so all the image boxes align horizontally. Then add gap 3 rem to create space between them. For the max width, use calc, and write 25 rem into 10, where 25 rem is the width of each img box and 10 is the total number of images we created. This ensures that the slider is wide enough to fit all the images in a row. After that, set the height to 25 rem so the slider's height matches the size of the img box, ensuring all images are aligned perfectly within the container. Next, let's style the div with class name sliderbox. Set its position to relative so we can later position child elements easily. Add a background color yellow so we can visually see its area, and set its height to 25 rem to match the image container's height. After that, add width 100% so that the slider box takes the full width of the page, allowing the images inside it to scroll smoothly across the screen. After that, add position absolute to the slider div so it's positioned relative to the slider box container. Now open the browser and you'll see all the images are positioned properly inside the slider area. Lastly, add left 0 to the slider div so it's aligned to the left edge of the slider box. Next, let's style the h2 tag inside the page 2 div. First, set its font family to quicksand to match the overall design. Then, increase its size by setting font size to 4 rem so it looks bold and prominent. Next, set font weight to 400 to keep it clean and not too heavy. After that, apply the color #0012A4 to give it a deep blue shade that complements the design. Finally, add margin 6 rem0 so there's enough space above and below the heading, making it visually balanced and easy to read. This way, the heading becomes the focal point at the top of the page. Next, let's style the div with class name text. Set its width to 50% so it doesn't take up too much space and looks balanced. Then, add margin top 4 rem to create some space from the elements above. Set text align to center so all the text inside is aligned neatly. Use display flex with flex direction column so the heading and paragraph stack vertically. Add justify content center and align item center to center everything inside the div both vertically and horizontally. Finally, set gap 1 rem to create some space between the text elements, making it look clean and organized. This styling will ensure the text section is well structured and visually appealing. Next, let's style the h3 tag inside the text div. First, set the font family to quicksand to match the overall design. Then, set the font size to 3 rem so it stands out as a subheading. Add font weight 400 to keep it clean and readable, and finally, set the color to #0012A4 to maintain consistency with the page's color scheme and make the text visually appealing. After that, let's style the paragraph tag inside the div with class name text. Set the font size to 1.1 rem to make it readable but not overpower the headings. Then, set the color to #032C95 so it complements the other text elements and maintains a consistent color palette across the page. Next, let's style the h4 tag inside the text div. Set its font size to 1 rem so it's subtle but noticeable, then set font weight to 500 for a medium emphasis. Add the color #0012A4 to match the heading palette, and transform the text to uppercase for a stronger visual impact. Finally, give it a border bottom with 2-pixel solid #032C95 to create a subtle bordered effect that stands out while keeping the design cohesive. Open the browser and you will see how the overall page currently looks. One last thing we need to do is remove the background color from the slider box. To do this, open the CSS file and delete the background, yellow line. This will make the slider box transparent and the images will stand out properly against the page background. Now that all the styling for our page 2 div is complete, we can move to the JavaScript file to create the scrolling animation for this page. Here, we'll use GSAP to animate the slider and the text elements as the user scrolls, giving our second page a smooth and dynamic visual effect that complements the first page. First, let's create a variable called TL3 and assign it the value sap.timeline. Inside this timeline, we'll define a ScrollTrigger object. For the ScrollTrigger, set trigger to .page 2, start to 23% 20%, end to 280% 20%. Enable markers for debugging, set scrub to true so the animation syncs with scroll, and add pin, true to keep the page pinned while scrolling. This sets up the foundation for all the scroll-based animations on page 2. Open the browser and you'll see the start and end markers appear, showing the scroll start and scroll end points. Once the start marker passes the scroll start position, the animation will begin, letting you visually track where the scroll-triggered animation kicks in. Now, open the Inspect window and select the slider div. In the CSS panel, locate the left, 0 style, then use the keyboard's up and down arrow keys to adjust the left value. As you decrease the value, you'll see the images sliding from right to left. When the left value reaches -160%, the last image becomes fully visible. We will use this property in our JavaScript code to create the smooth sliding animation for the slider. Next, we'll write TL3.to and select the div with the class name slider. Inside this method, we create an object and set left to -160%. This will animate the slider div, moving all the images smoothly from right to left as we scroll down the page. Open the browser and scroll the page. You will see our sliding animation working perfectly, with all the images moving smoothly from right to left, creating an amazing visual effect for the page. Lastly, remove the markers, true line so the start and end markers are no longer visible, giving the animation a clean and professional look. That's all for today. Our website looks amazing, and all the scrolling animations are working perfectly. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. Your feedback keeps me motivated to create the next video. If you enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful, please give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to stay updated with all our latest content. Your support helps us create more exciting and valuable videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode of DevWave Diaries.